Labor Senator Kimberley Kitching and Liberal MP Jason Falinski. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you, PK.
I'm going to start with you, if I can, on this breaking news, Kimberley, in relation to this detained Australian. What do you make of this news? This is pretty disturbing stuff. I know you watch foreign affairs closely. It looks like Chinese authorities are set to charge him with endangering state security. This is a pretty grave, terrible news, isn't it?
Well, it is, because obviously he's been held in detention with no charge for some months, and his wife was briefly detained as well when she was attempting to visit her husband. Obviously, you know, in a country like ours with a rule of law and the right of habeas corpus, we don't condone the holding of people without charge. So this is disturbing. We would hope that consular access has been provided. I understand that's has been fairly intermittent, but with the charging, hopefully that allows allows people to visit him and to have proper legal or recourse to proper legal advice. These are all serious issues, and obviously, we will watch his fate. I mean, if we don't have access to him, we will have to watch his fate very closely.
OK, well, let's park that there, because this is a developing story and I think there are many details we don't know. The big issue today, of course, has been drought. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has announced legislation to establish the Drought Fund, which lapsed before the election. It will be reintroduced to Parliament next week. Jason, I'll go to you on this. I mean, the government's saying Labor should vote for it. Labor's saying, hang on a minute, we'll only vote for it if you give us new money, not redirected money from infrastructure. Don't they have a case here?
Well, I don't think so. I think in actual fact that what we need to be doing is ensuring that our infrastructure spending is going where it can most usefully be used. Circumstances change. I know that Kimberley will make the correct point that the drought didn't happen yesterday, but it has gone on longer than we expected it to. It's important that government reprioritise its spending where it can to provide alleviation to farmers and producers on the land, so that we do what we can to make sure that when the drought ends, as many of them are still in a position to take advantage of the great opportunities that Australia's farming industry has in Asia and other markets globally. Okay.
Kimberley, well, one point you might make has been preempted. Let's see if you make it.
Thank you, Jason.
The drought has been going on.
Anything I can do to help you.
Thank you. I appreciate
solidarity
it.
Between you both.
Yeah.
But Labor's set to vote against it, is that right?
Well, I think that we would like to see the details of the package. I mean, it was pretty scant on detail today from the Prime Minister. And I guess that comes when you don't really go to an election campaign with a lot of policy. But I think that, well, it's true. But I think that what we're seeing now is, if we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, one has to wonder, and given that we've had from the Treasurer statements around, the importance of economic stimulus coming from infrastructure, one might think that taking money out of infrastructure is not really going to help in that instance. And I think that we would need to see some new money on this in this space.
All right, let's move to another issue. I want to go through quite a few, actually, because it's been one of those weeks where there's quite a lot, actually, on the agenda, but it's all happening concurrently. And this issue is Newstart. Jason, I spoke a little earlier to Barnaby Joyce, and Barnaby Joyce says there should be a rise in the Newstart payment now. Do you think it's time to reconsider the government's position? I mean, you're a backbencher, you can be a bit freer about your views, given it hasn't moved for 25 years and it's incredibly low. Business says it should rise. I mean, there's a range of people who now say it's time that it sees a lift.
The first thing I would say is there are very few people who are just on Newstart. 99% of people who are receiving Newstart are receiving other supplementary payments as well. The second thing I would say is that the government always has these things under review to ensure that we get the best outcome for all Australians. Because the important thing here is actually not a better welfare system, but a system that gets young people into work. The fact of the matter is the best form of welfare is a job. The outcomes of people who are stuck on welfare, and I don't have the figures to hand, but if you are under 25 and on welfare, the chances of you remaining on welfare are incredibly high. And that's something that we want to discourage as much as we possibly can. Look, there are a range of people who have got a range of comments on this, but I think they're looking at the wrong thing. I think what they need to be looking at is the welfare of the people involved and the people who are on these payments, and how we get them into work as quickly as possible so that they can live the fullest lives possible.
It's actually business, though, Jason, who says they are coming to interviews and they can't even buy the right clothes for those interviews to front up, to even begin to get an equal opportunity. So given that, isn't it time to rethink what you're saying? I mean, people are just, they can't do simple things to equip themselves to be at the front door, at that interview, ready to actually apply on an equal footing.
Well, I would say to businesses that are so concerned about things like that, that they should be taking the initiative of looking past what clothes people are wearing and actually undertaking proper job interviews to give people an opportunity to undertake the work and an opportunity to get on into the labour force. I mean, is it really their contention that they're not employing people on the basis of what clothes they're wearing? If business leaders are saying that to you, and I have no doubt that some of them are, I really think that the issue is with them, not with the Australian government or the taxpayer who are providing these payments. I
think it's a pretty reasonable thing, actually. People have to front up looking professional. That's a pretty standard thing in our community. I'm sure people who come through your door wanting a job in your electorate office, you expect a standard. That's the way the Australian economy works. I mean, what do you make of that, Kimberley? Those comments made by Jason?
Well, yeah. I think Jason's missing the point here, and it's the Business Council of Australia that's come out to say that, in fact, has been a negative impact by the very low rate of Newstart. So this is a Business Council of Australia, and you know, if they're saying that, then I think we can say that it's too low, and I think everyone agrees it's too low, but for the coalition. So on that, I mean, we're talking about people who can't get public transport. So not driving, not owning a car, but being able to afford public transport in order to get to a job interview. It is too low, and it is actually inhibiting people from actually seeking employment. So I think the other thing, the other question is, of course, around economic stimulus, which, of course, the government is going to have to grapple with in this term of Parliament, is, of course, if they raise a Newstart, if they can't think they should raise Newstart on a compassionate or on, in fact, on a ground that that is actually to help people, maybe they can look at it in a fiscal stimulus way, Patricia. And I would say that, in fact, that if they did raise Newstart, of course, there would be a direct stimulatory effect on our economy, because people would spend that money if they're on Newstart. So, for example, they would be able to go out to purchase clothing that would make them look professional, or be able to actually afford public transport to get to the job interview, and to actually be able to think about being interviewed for a job and seeking a job.
So, Kimberley, on that issue, though, some of your colleagues have actually called for a very specific rise, that it should rise to $400 or something. Are you in that school, that Labor should actually commit to a tangible rise, or pushing for one rather than just a review?
Well, I think that, in fact, Look, I think there has to be a holistic review on this matter. Youth unemployment figures came out today. They've increased to just under 1%, by 0.8%. They're at 12%. Youth underemployment is even higher. It's in the high double digits. So I think that what we're seeing is that we need to look at this in a very holistic way to ensure that we are finding a way forward on Newstart and finding... So I wouldn't want to commit here, because I don't think we've got all the factors in play. Of course, before the election, we said we would commit to a review, and I think that we do need to look at that. And really, quite frankly, it would be helpful if the government could commit to doing this rather than dismissing it out of hand as they have done.
All right.
So, Patricia, can I just reply to some of those comments? First of all, I don't understand how it's compassionate encouraging people to remain on welfare. This government has got more young people in work than any government in the history of our federation.
That's not true.
That is absolutely true, Kimberley. You know that's the truth.
Underemployment has increased by 3%.
Participation rates amongst young people under the age of 25 have never been higher. The number of people working have never been higher in that age group.
Jason,
and I go back to what I originally said, which if business is if business is so concerned about people turning up to job interviews without wearing proper clothes, then I would encourage them to look past that rather than constantly going to the taxpayer and demanding that they hand out yet more money. I mean, these jobs, these people have a right to live their lives to the fullest potential possible, and that requires business to stop shirking its responsibility and demanding more money from taxpayers and actually starting to front up and run some programs of their own. Now, there are some businesses in Australia that do that. Twiggy Forrester comes to mind, but more should do that rather than simply passing this off to the Australian people. And you know what? Labor knows this to be the case because, as Kimberley just made the point, during the federal election, the best they would commit to is a review.
A review in order, because I think we all agree, other than the coalition government, everyone agrees, including business groups, that it is too low.
Then why won't you commit to increasing? Why won't the Labor Party simply commit to increasing Newstart? You wouldn't commit to it during the election, you won't commit to it now, and you know the reason why.
Newsflash, you're the government. And since...
Well, Kimberley, newsflash, you're the opposition that are making these demands without holding yourself to the same thing.
I'm the presenter. So I want to move on to another topic. I don't know where we're getting on this. I get your position, Jason. It's your position. And Kimberley, you won't commit to a particular increase, but you think it should be increased.
Yes.
Let's talk about workers. This is, look at this segue. Workers who do have a job but aren't getting or didn't get the amount they were meant to be paid. Celebrity chef George Calombaris' hospitality establishment has basically had to back pay $7.8 million in wages and superannuation after admitting to underpaying more than 500 workers. And I just think that's incredible. The company has been fined $200,000. Jason, I'll begin with you. Is that good enough? Should wage underpayment be criminalised?
Well, I'm not sure that criminalising wage underpayment helps. I know that there are some people...
if you're doing that and you're clearly doing it systemically to try and rip off your workers, shouldn't you face harsher penalties? Sorry, Patricia, I didn't realise this. Was George doing it in a systematic way that was ripping off workers? $7.8 million.
But that's the finding of the Fair Work Ombudsman?
Yeah, that's right.
They've found that he was... negligent in the way that he was systematically attempting to rip people off rather than just being negligent.
$7.8 million, $200,000.
No, but there's a difference between being negligent and there's a difference between doing it in a manner and form that was deliberately trying to rip people off. I'm not sure which one it is.
So do you think he accidentally ripped people off?
Well, what's his total payroll? If his payroll's, $500 million, $7.8 million, yeah, it is possible.
The judgment is available, and I think let's not get into the weeds here. People are watching this show,
sorry.
Right? So, do you think that this should be criminalised?
No, I don't think it should be criminalised, except in cases where it is systemic and ongoing, and there have been multiple offences. So this is an indication of the system working. There was an inquiry. He's been fined $200,000. He's had to back pay his workers with interest, and including making superannuation payments. It's not a good look for him. No. I don't think that he would do this ever again, and I think that it's an indication that the systems we have in place are working.
How about you, Kimberley?
Well, I think the fine of $200,000 equates to about 2.5% of the underpayment to the workers. So it's not, it's not very good, I don't think. Look, the Victorian government took to the state election here a legislation to criminalise employers who underpaid their employees. I think we are seeing a rise in the number of cases where employees are being underpaid, and it is systemic. And I think people try it on to see what they can do. These are people who often are not really equipped it takes a lot of courage sometimes to take these kind of actions. And that's why we actually went to the federal election with a policy around a small claims tribunal that would work in conjunction with the Fair Work Commission that would deal with matters up to $100,000 and be able to adjudicate very quickly, because of course these cases can take some time. So you've got employees who risk the fact that they won't have their job because, obviously an employer might not continue to employ them. And secondly, it takes some courage to actually sometimes do these actions. And we would see that a small claims tribunal working closely with the Fair Work Commission would be a good solution to this, and also the criminalising of the underpayments.
All right, thank you to both of you. It has been a feisty panel, but I like them that way. So
my apologies for that.
No reason to apologise. Everyone's entitled to their view on this program. Thanks for coming on.